Welcome to Dream Farm. Today we're right out on one of these bedding points that I'm looking forward to hunting this coming season. And we're going to do some work here. We're going to improve this bedding area. And we're going to do that by cutting down a lot of the junk timber that's out on this point. And that will bring more sunlight to the forest and to the forest floor. That will stimulate regeneration. Hopefully we'll get some hardwood regeneration. But no matter what, we're going to get browse and we're going to get cover, and those are two important and critical aspects of deer habitat. The other thing that maybe is a little bit underrated is the fact that this will also make it thicker from the standpoint of the deer won't have the same amount of visibility that they would have if it was open. So that makes it easier to sneak around. So coming in and going out of hunting this area will be a lot better if the deer can't see us as far. First step is a sweep. See if we can find any shed antlers in here, and then we'll start cutting down some of these trees. I'll talk with you a little bit about which trees I'm cutting and why, and maybe just some really short information on how to cut them. And Jordan's going to cut down her first tree ever. Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute Food Plot Blends, the Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail app, and Hoyt Archery. No luck on the antlers. Jordan found a spot to huddle out of the wind here though.
Sun feels good.
Sun does feel good. In walking through here, this is pretty thick to begin with, so we're not going to have to cut a lot of big trees. But the second generation of saplings coming up are starting to get a little bit too big, and I'm gonna have to cut some of those back. We'll take a few bigger trees out. We're probably gonna take a lot of saplings, and about every 10 years it seems like you got to go through these areas, because the first time you might open it up cutting a lot of bigger trees, and then after that the smaller saplings start to come in and they start to get high enough where they're creating a canopy. And then you still don't get sunlight to the ground. That's kind of the situation here. The other thing I've noticed in these bedding areas like this is the deer really do like to bed where they can see. So they're not super excited about bedding right in the middle of the thickest stuff, but they do like to have that thick area nearby that they can jump right into for security. And plus, like I said, it creates a lot of browse. So even though you may not find beds right in the middle of the nastiest stuff, it does benefit you in these bedding areas to have those types of locations, because again, like I said, the deer like to bed right around the fringe of those. That's what we're going to do next. We didn't try too hard to find antlers, but there weren't any obvious ones, so it's time to get to work. Let's talk about safety gear real quick too. I wear a hard hat helmet with a face visor on it, and that's really important because you don't want chips flying up and hitting you in the face, or sticks, branches when you're cutting a small tree. The other one is obviously you don't want something falling on you, and if you don't have any kind of protection for the top of your head, that's a bad thing. And then I wear these Kevlar chaps, and they will stop the chain if for whatever reason you're sawing and it goes through the tree. They'll bind up the chain and stop it. So that's another really good precaution. And I'm sure there's others that the professionals use, but that's the bare minimum of items that you need to be safe out here doing this. So we're gonna go in and pick a couple trees. I'll talk about why I'm cutting them and a little bit about how I'm cutting them, and then we'll start laying them down. Like I was saying, there's a lot of smaller saplings that are coming in, and these are prickly ash, which is an invasive, and we're gonna have to come back again with some different equipment to really deal with these, and then it'll be fire that will eventually clean those up. But it's a whole patch behind me of prickly ash. You don't want that. You don't want any kind of invasives on your property. I know some people say, well, certain ones are useful, but they're still invasive, which means that it's really easy for them to get out of control, and you don't want any time for a monoculture of anything growing on hunting property. You want to have a lot of diversity, and there's nothing in these invasives that makes them useful to wildlife anyway, usually. So we'll go a little bit deeper, and I can see some saplings down here that are of a size that we're going to cut down just to open things up. So you can see now we're getting into an area with a bunch of smaller saplings. So I'm just going to start picking them. I mean, I can see hackberry. There's quite a few little hackberries in here. I'll probably target those. I'm going to try to the best of my ability to avoid cutting down oak saplings. I'm not the world's best at identifying tree species when they're this young and this small. So I'm probably going to knock off a few that I shouldn't. But the whole idea is to take an area like this, which looks thick, but it's only thick at eye level. If you look at the ground level, there's nothing down there because all of these saplings now are big enough. Like I said, they're creating that canopy that keeps the sunlight from coming in. So like I said, about every 10 years, you got to rotate through these areas and remove the bigger stuff again. There's a lot of strategies on TSI. The one that I mostly subscribe to, because I'm not a forester, so I'm not trying to select the better oak trees out of a stand that's primarily oak. I just take everything but the oak, walnut, and in some cases I'll leave a few of the shagbark, hickory, cherry trees, stuff like that that has maybe more of a forestry potential, but otherwise, you know, I'm pretty heartless when it comes to like elm trees and you know, some of those kind of you know, like elder trees. The nice thing about those too, when you cut them off, if you don't kill the stump resprouts, and all of the energy that's in the root system then goes into those sprouts that are coming out of that stump. So they're real rich in nutrients, and the deer will eat those. So I've heard them called mineral stumps before, but you do get the benefit when you drop these trees that you get those resprouts that the deer feed on pretty aggressively. My chain came off on that last one, so while I'm taking a break, just some real quick safety tips. I've been cutting really small trees, so the risk is really, really low. But once we started getting into some of these bigger ones, there's a couple of key things you need to look at. You always want a notch on the direction that you want the tree to fall. You gotta look at the tree first and make sure that gravity is, you know, gonna be working with you instead of against you. And then you always want to have an escape route. You don't want to be cutting down a tree and then not having a way to get out of the way if it's unpredictable on how it falls. Because even the wind can affect that. You can think it's going to go one way, then you get a wind gust and then it goes another way. Another super important thing to look for is up in the top to make sure that it's not tangled up with any other trees. Because you might be bringing this tree down, but what you don't realize is you're bringing a dead branch off the tree next to it, and that dead branch falls straight down, and it could, you know, end up right on top of you. I know people who have died actually from that, you know, professional loggers. They get moving too quick, they cut a tree down and a big dead branch falls from the tree next to it right on top of them. Very bad deal. So it's not a big deal with these little trees, but once you get into these bigger ones, you really got to be super careful on everything that you do. One more thing too, on the other side of the ridge, there's a crew of guys working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife that are cutting down cedar trees. And this is a practice that releases what they call a goat prairie. So we'll get you a little bit of a preview of that, but we'll come back in a future episode and talk about what a goat prairie is and a little bit more about the details of what these guys are doing. But it's a pretty cool project that they're working on, and they're professionals. These guys do this for a living and they're really good at it, and we'll spend more time talking about that in a future episode too. Jordan's debut tree to cut, some kind of I don't know, it's an elm looking thing over here. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I know it's not one of the species we're trying to protect. So her first step is going to be to cut a little small notch on the side where she thinks it's going to fall, which is going to be down the hill, because it's already hanging that way. This will be a super easy tree to start on. And then all she has to do is come on the uphill side of it and just finish out the cut. And this tree will drop right down into that little hole. It'll be your big moment at the chainsaw.
Trained my whole career for this.
On this next segment, we are going to take a soil test from 2 of my food plots. And I've got the stuff on the four-wheeler that we're going to use. We've got a small bucket for mixing the samples. We've got a little shovel for digging up the samples. I've got my soil test kits on there too. I don't really need those right now, but I wanted to show those to you anyway. And then talk about where I got them and what I'm going to do with them. The dogs are not part of the required equipment list.
They help though.
Yeah, sometimes we wish they weren't on the list at all, but they're pretty good. But anyway, the goal is to get these soil tests done well in advance of the planting season, so you've got time to fix up the soil if there's something wrong with it. We talked about in a previous episode the importance of getting the pH especially right, which is, you know, adding lime or liquid calcium. And then the fertility is important too, of course, and the soil test will tell you, based on what you're going to plant, what you need to add to the soil to make it perfect in order to grow that crop well. So the soil test kits that we've got are from the Whitetail Institute, and they've got a program.
Plot Perfection?
Plot Perfection is an app that you can get on your phone, and you can connect that to your account, and it will give you the results of your soil test. It will also let you track individual food plots, you know, from year to year, what you planted there, what you did on each one, like how much fertilizer and lime you applied. So it's a pretty cool app. The also, if you order one now, you get 2 soil test packets for free
If you create an account and subscribe.
So that's what we're doing now. You're supposed to take samples in more than one location in a plot. It says in the instructions for these soil tests to be anywhere from 10 to 20 locations, and then you mix it in the bucket. So that's what we're doing now. Basically, is we're gathering up the samples. We're going to mix them, and then I'm going to, you know, as we leave this one, I'm going to pour this little pile out inside the shed on top of a dry surface to dry down. And then we stir it all up, and then you get your average across that whole plot. This is about a 3-acre plot behind us, and then the next one we're going to do is about the same size, 2 to 3 acres. So rather than getting 3 or 4 soil tests inside of that one plot, you just take multiple samples and then you mix them together, and then you just take just enough out of there to fill the small bag that comes with the soil test. And then that's the little bag, and the information that you fill out is what you ship to Whitetail Institute.
How far under the surface do you have to dig to get the soil for the test?
On the sheets here, they recommended anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 inches. So we're just going to scratch the surface, you know, whatever leaves and stuff off, and then dig down a little ways, take a little bit from each spot as we go down this plot behind us. By the time we get to the bottom, we'll have them all in that blue bucket, and then, like I said, we'll mix it all up really good, pour it out, let it dry, and then we'll pull our sample from that we put in the bag. And you can ship it wet, but it just costs more probably to ship something if you don't let it dry down first. So if you have any questions, you can always contact the Whitetail Institute. They've got people standing by to help you out with this whole process. Well, that's it for this episode. The main takeaway, I think, is the importance of coming back through the areas that have been cut in the past and hitting them again. I think it's about a 10-year cycle. TSI is not one and done. The other point I'm trying to make here is the importance of making your bedding areas more attractive by making them thicker. Also makes them more huntable because the deer can't see you as easily when you're coming and going. I've got a lot more ground to cover on this farm. Just scratched the surface of the work that needs to be done here. So there's going to be a lot more to do, more soil tests to get. Hopefully you learned a little bit from that segment, and I guess we'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Dream Farm. And remember,
always dream big.